Greetings, IB Artist. This is Miss A, and today I wanted to take you through curatorial rationale samples. Hopefully you've watched my first video, and this is a continuation in the sense that I thought I would take you through a couple of samples to really look at how two of the candidates have structured the curatorial rationale, and I'm going to draw your attention to how they've done things successfully. This way I'm actually giving you concrete examples of how to do things well. I'm trying to kind of spread out the information because I know that my videos are quite dense with information, so I like to kind of spread things out into a couple of videos so that you can take it all in and process it. So hopefully this is a good plan. I just want to say that I do not own the rights to publish these samples. Technically they belong to the candidate, and then once the candidate submits the work, it belongs to the IBO. I am simply using these samples for educational purposes. That's my disclaimer, if you like. So let's get cracking and let's have a look at these two samples that I've got for you. So this candidate opens up with the statement, "The intention of my project is to demonstrate how people experience life." Kind of broad statement. But then she gets into specifics. "My project is divided into three primal branches: strangers, crucial relationships, and self-contemplation." So already there's an organization there. To communicate this to my audience, I have devised a narrative arc in my curatorship centered around my self-portrait that expands laterally. Right? So again, you already can visualize the organization of the space. It was essential that I explored my own experiences through self-reflection, and my largest painting, blah blah, encapsulates this. It was inspired by the groundbreaking, bold work of Jenny Saville, whose painting, Propped, struck audiences with its large, unapologetically grotesque image of a woman. By hanging blah blah centrally in my exhibition, it becomes the bridge between strangers and crucial relationships, and represents how everyone in this project is connected by my mediation of them, right? So she's putting herself, or her self-portrait rather, in the middle of this exhibition because she's saying that she is the mediator of all these other categories, which she has already stated: strangers, crucial relationships, and then self-contemplation. So again, it's very kind of well organized, and immediately you think of how she has strategized this division and this placement of her artworks. She also is telling you that she has taken her cue from Jenny Saville, so the artist research is there, and this is a good way to kind of highlight things that have impacted or influenced your artwork or your curatorship. So I began by looking at experience objectively, and my early work examines how it can be portrayed through the third person. So this is the beginning. In my last video I said that it is fine and good to really explain where you started and how ideas have developed further. I explore this through portraiture, visualizing what it means to create and demonstrate time and stories. I focused on strangers from the street, the most prominent being a poet, Joseph. I experimented through textiles, realism, paper cutting techniques, exploring how I could project the little I knew of him into portraiture. So again, she's talking about the media that she used in this case and how she tried to explore her theme through them. She doesn't really explain at this point, how the materials and her theme are connected, but we'll see if she does that later on. So the pieces named after his poems, blah 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 and blah blah, show this exploration. Reading some of his poems quickly, redirected me towards connections and relationships, sparking the most profound and personal works. Here you have a sense of, this is where I started. She was looking at this poet, but this quickly led to other things that, she wanted to take further. Those regarding valued relationships and how the experience of those have shaped me. In curating, I took inspiration from Gerhard Lang and the Shape of Light exhibition, looking at how the manipulation of space and scale can impact an audience. So here she is again contextualizing or referencing an artist and their arrangement of their exhibition, which informed her own decisions. So this is the type of thing that, immediately you know that this person is taking themselves seriously, they have done the research, they want to really maximize the impact of the exhibition on the audience. I utilized the white wall space in my exhibition to separate pieces such as blah blah and blah blah to signal different avenues of work. I've also used this concept in one of the milestone pieces of my project blah blah. The entire crucial relationships aspect of my project was inspired by Anthony Cairns' EICTY1 from the Tate Modern Shape of Light exhibition 2018. Again, referencing an exhibition that she probably visited. This, as I've said before, tells me that she's done the research, that she frequents, that she goes to galleries and museums, and basically that she's a serious student. Which gave me the idea to manipulate small-scale artworks by isolating them on plain open walls. So this is a strategy that she's discussing. Blah blah consists of 10 4x5-inch drawings spread out across a 2-meter wall, very specific, reiterating how small each drawing is, bringing attention to how they're all part of a bigger picture. The sister piece to these miniature drawings is Blah Blah, a 2x2-meter abstract wallpaper inspired by Cy Twombly's Apollo, again referencing an artist. She's told us that she's researched an exhibition and gone to kind of see how it's set up and thought about what she was experiencing as an audience while she was there. She's talking about specific strategies by discussing her small drawings and how they were, spread out on a 2-meter wall to emphasize really how small they were. So they're playing with scale here. And referencing an artist, Cy Twombly, and looking at their work, which has impacted the decision making. This student is serious, this student is learning, this student is applying their knowledge in specific and creative ways that apply to their own work. Which is, this is the dream. This is what we all dream about, right? The perfect student. These artworks exercise how scale can intrigue and overwhelm an audience by provoking questions and overpowering them simultaneously. And the pieces side by side further exaggerate how scale draws conflicting emotions from the audience. The purpose of my exhibition is to tell a private story and immerse the audience, but at the same time create discomfort and curiosity. So that's part of her intention. The audience should be curious at what information is being withheld from them, but also feel discomforted by how personal the show actually is when they pay attention. Interesting. Involving the floor in the curatorship of the exhibition is also crucial. Blah Blah interacts with the space and audience by inviting them to take part through the threads being sprawled across the floor. This adds more dimension to the gallery and immerses the audience because they must physically step around the extended embroidery threads, reaching out to the viewer. Similarly, the Blah Blah film installation has been displayed on top of Blah Blah so that it bombards the auditory and visual senses. The curatorship makes the film difficult to understand and hear, which forces the viewers to concentrate whilst trying to listen and watch the piece. By projecting it over the A6 drawings, the sizes of the portraits in the two pieces contrast each other, sparking the idea that the film is an overwhelming piece to interact with. The overlaid display should invoke curiosity and shock, underpinning the entire concept of my show. To expose the nature of experience and examine the ways in which it can be represented and interacted with. This is why every piece in my exhibition is titled using my film extracts, phrases those closest to me have used to describe how they have experienced me. So basically she rounds up the whole thing nicely. She refers to different parts of her exhibition, ties them up all together. So by referencing each component of her exhibition, explaining it, and then connecting it with other components of her exhibition, they very clearly convey the lengths they have gone to strategize aspects of their space, of their curatorship. So everything is intentional, everything is planned, there is a consideration of the audience, and the way the exhibition is set up is supported by references to artists, references to exhibition strategies artists have used. They talk about how the space was organized. I will say one thing that this person didn't, or this candidate did not get into enough for me, is the use of materials. The candidate mentioned the materials used, and this person was a very strong candidate. I remember their exhibition. There was a variety of media, and the application of media was of a very high standard. They do kind of talk about, use of film. They didn't really go into why the media was used. However, because overall this person is very conscious about every decision that they've made, and they've really gone out of their way to convey or communicate the thought process behind it, it's very convincing. So this is someone who got full marks. Let's go to another sample. Okay. So this person, again, I do not own the rights to publish this. I am using this purely for educational purposes. Over the course of the past 2 years, I created roughly 20 works of extremely varied media and concepts, including 11 within my first year. Okay. Not necessarily very interesting, but it's clear. I looked into subjects including diet and weight loss trends, social media culture, and consumerism. However, I found myself consistently drawn to religious imagery and messages. Because of my fascination with the subjects, towards the beginning of my second year of the class, it was these concepts that I decided to focus on. So this is what we talked about in the previous video, explaining where the starting point was and how this changed for the candidate, and they went into a different direction. It's good to clarify that. In particular, I was interested in the idea of the apocalypse. In the New Testament, the apocalypse is referred to as the rapture and is preceded by a series of specific events. In my initial study of the topic, I began to recognize many of these events in the modern day, and so I wanted to compare current social political issues to the seals, or events which would warn the arrival of the rapture. Interesting subject, not for everyone, but this is not a situation where the examiner either agrees or disagrees with the candidate. That is of no importance. The important thing is that, are they going to follow through now in really laying out the thought processes behind their decision making? Are they going to answer all the criteria to the level that is expected? That's the only concern here. It is not about, do I agree with this person? Do I like their work? That's irrelevant. I also wanted my work to consider who in the modern day is making the judgments, and which behavior would qualify as good or bad based on modern ideals rather than biblical ones. To emphasize these guiding ideas, I wanted to include pieces which juxtapose modern and old-fashioned mediums. I was particularly inspired by textiles as I began studying textile artists like Zangewa and Ringgold, as discussed in my comparative study. So again, strong reference to, previously researched artists. And again, this tells me that this person is serious. They're basing their decision on the learning that they have acquired through their comparative study, and they are now applying it to their own work. I found that the medium was extremely pervasive and accessible in both the modern day in modes of fashion, household objects like tablecloths and curtains, as well as in religious settings. This is basically them arriving at the conclusion that textiles really is the way to go. They thought it was an appropriate material for the exploration of their concepts. I recalled objects like tapestries, garments, and decorative pieces such as the Torah and Shala covers, which I have had personal experience with. This personalizes it. This person is very much engaged with their thoughts on religion and biblical references, etc., etc. So this immediately, whether I, am interested in that subject or not, immediately connects me with this person because the thought process is intriguing. I want to know more about how they went about exploring the topic that they're interested in. As an extension of this idea, I wanted to make my show very tactile and focus on texture with my works. This led to a layering of different fabric types, velvet and wool. Ideally, none of the pieces in my show would be off limits, so to speak. The viewer would be allowed to feel and interact with the pieces as they wanted. Should this lead to their deterioration or even destruction, it would hopefully drive the idea of the apocalypse home, i.e., while all of these events I've illustrated are bold and important now, eventually they will be lost to time. I also feel that the viewer's interaction with the pieces will keep them present, sort of as a means to acknowledge that these events, while seemingly huge in distance, are happening right now to us. So this idea is very, very interesting because it kind of contradicts the general idea of preservation. So, when you go to a museum or a gallery, you're usually not allowed to touch anything. And this person is saying that actually it's important to their own concept of basically everything being ephemeral, everything being destructible. And the touching of the textiles that this candidate is creating is helping or grounding the audience in the present moment. By touching it right now, you're here. You're not, it's not an abstract idea. So this is very, very interesting. Very sophisticated idea. So explaining the use of material according to the concept of, the ephemeral, or something that does not last forever, and also this idea of engaging the audience in the present moment. Very, very interesting. For my collection, I decided to choose works from year 2, which had a stronger focus on the text I was studying. The works each emphasized a particular aspect of the rapture and allowed me to explore style and medium in a new way. One of my pieces references the devastation of rivers and seas, which I compared to the water crisis in rural India. I used a trashed television with acrylic paint to show the dry landscape and water flowing out of the area to the agricultural facilities. This piece forced me to consider different types of framing. The viewer will find embroidery hoops left on stitched works as frames. So this idea of visually depicting a concept, but the way it's done is that there's a kind of contrast or juxtaposition with the materials used. The materials used are not traditional, right? So it's really a very interesting combination right there. The piece forced me to consider different types of framing. The viewer will find embroidery hoops left unstitched works as frames. Digital works are painted and stitched into. The Year 2 pieces also showcase a personal style I developed throughout Year 1. In Year 2, I allowed myself to include work that featured heavy lines and a less rendered style featured in my blah blah piece, as well as a bold patterning and non-naturalistic colors featured in my blah blah piece. So here this person is taking us through the development and really making it very, very clear that the progress that was made from Year 1 to Year 2 has now given her a unique or personalized style. So she has clearly been so actively engaged in developing the work that she now has a signature style, which is pretty amazing for someone in, IB Year 2. And I actually remember this work, and it was really, truly very unique. Another thing I'm going to say, what was very impressive, was the references to very currently relevant artists. And generally speaking, I think the trend that I found this year overall was definitely textiles. A lot of people using textiles, and specifically embroidery, which is fascinating. And of course this is related to current contemporary artists' work, like Zangewa, which she mentioned. Again, this tells me that this is an informed person, someone who is up on current events. If given unlimited space and time, I would like these pieces to be placed in a hallway with a lot of foot traffic, so more people would touch them. Again, an unusual idea. So let's see how this person explains that choice. I would almost prefer the show not to be given its own room or designated space, and rather be placed on the walls leading to another show. This would contribute to the idea that these events are happening as we continue with our lives and are not given proper attention. Unfortunately, due to quarantine in my area, I will have to get creative with the display of my work in my own home. Really beautifully concluded there. Again, they mention an issue that they had, but it's kept to a minimum. It is, an appropriate remark made in an appropriate way. This is not the focus of her curatorial rationale. She is simply mentioning it because it's something that the candidate had to deal with, which, is fair enough. And this was last year, so the whole corona thing was a complete shock to everybody. So beautifully handled. So I hope this explains what a successful curatorial rationale really contains. At the end of the day, the work is really, really important. That's the most important part of the whole exhibition. But this is where you get to really draw attention to all the work that has gone into it, all the work that's gone into planning and curating the exhibition, all the knowledge that has been derived from the research done previously for the comparative study, and also to explain and justify the choices in materials, in the media, and of course in the arrangement and the curatorial decisions that were made.